Serafina squinted against the harsh desert sun, the rough rope biting into her wrists. She was tied tight to the front of the monstrous iron horse, a gleaming, black-armored train that seemed to stretch on forever. Fear twisted in her stomach, but her chin remained high. Bart Thorne, that snake-oil salesman turned war profiteer, thought he could use her as a shield, a bargaining chip to crush the spirit of Redemption Gulch. He was wrong. Serafina wasn't some damsel. She was the Gulch's schoolteacher, its heart, and she'd be darned if she'd give Thorne the satisfaction of seeing her break. The train whistle shrieked, a sound that echoed across the dusty plains, a promise of destruction aimed squarely at her beloved town. Serafina glanced down the tracks, seeing the tiny figures of her friends and neighbors, their faces etched with worry. She knew they wouldn't back down easily, not for Thorne or his money. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple. The heat was sweltering, amplified by the metal of the train car pressing against her back. She tried to wriggle her hands free, but the knots were too tight, expertly tied by Thorne's goons. "Don't bother, sweetheart," a gruff voice chuckled from inside the train. "Just enjoy the ride, it'll be the last one you ever take." Serafina glared at the armored window, knowing Thorne was watching her, reveling in her predicament. She may be bound, but her spirit was free. She would not scream, she would not beg, she would show him the grit of Redemption Gulch. She focused on the image of the wildflowers that bloomed every spring near the creek, the laughter of her students, the warmth of the community she cherished. Those memories fueled her defiance. The train lurched forward slowly at first, then with increasing speed. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the faint smell of coal smoke. Serafina closed her eyes, bracing herself, not for death, but for the inevitable clash, for the moment when Redemption Gulch would either rise or fall. She just hoped anyone, could stop this metal beast before it reached her town. The man responsible for Serafina's predicament, Bartholomew Bart Thorne, was a walking caricature of greed. He was a portly man, his belly straining against his expensive but ill-fitting suit. A thick, greasy mustache dominated his face, twitching with every cruel thought that crossed his mind. Thorne had arrived in Redemption Gulch a year ago, peddling miracle cures and empty promises. He'd charmed the townsfolk, swindled them out of their savings, and then, when the war broke out, he'd found his true calling, war profiteering. He'd secured a contract to supply the army with boots, but instead of quality leather, he delivered shoddy, paper-thin soles that fell apart after a week. The soldiers were furious, but Thorne didn't care. He was making a killing. He used his ill-gotten gains to buy up land around Redemption Gulch, intending to turn it into a mining operation. The townsfolk refused to sell, so Thorne resorted to more persuasive tactics. He hired thugs to harass them, cut off their water supply, and now, as a final act of desperation, he was using an armored train, equipped with a massive battering ram, to flatten their homes and businesses. He'd heard rumors of gold beneath the town square and was determined to get his hands on it, no matter the cost. Thorne paced back and forth in the train's engine car, a snifter of brandy in his hand. He glanced at Serafina through the window, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Foolish woman," he muttered. "She thinks she can stand up to me. They all do, but they all learn eventually that Bart Thorne always gets what he wants." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To Redemption Gulch," he sneered. "May it soon be nothing more than a memory." He took a long swig of brandy, the liquor burning a trail down his throat, a feeling he relished almost as much as the thought of crushing the town and lining his pockets with gold. He was a monster, plain and simple, and he enjoyed every minute of it. But little did he know, his reign of terror was about to come to a screeching, explosive halt. Meanwhile, miles away from the approaching iron behemoth, in a dusty workshop cluttered with gears, wires, and half-finished contraptions, Ezekiel "Zeke" Stone was putting the final touches on his most ambitious invention yet. Zeke wasn't your average cowboy. He was a tinkerer, a dreamer, a man who saw the world not as it was, but as it could *be. His workshop, a converted stable behind his small ranch, was a testament to his eccentric genius. He was tall and lanky, with a shock of unruly brown hair that perpetually fell into his bright blue eyes. His hands, calloused from years of working with metal, moved with surprising dexterity as he adjusted the carburetor on his creation. This wasn't just any motorcycle. This was the Dynamite Devil, a custom-built machine powered by a modified steam engine and armed with strategically placed charges of dynamite. Zeke had designed it as a faster, more efficient way to herd cattle, but he'd quickly realized its potential for other applications. He'd heard about Thorne's plans, about the armored train, and about Serafina. He'd known Serafina since they were kids, sharing secrets under the old oak tree by the creek. He always admired her spirit and her kindness. The thought of her tied to that train, at the mercy of that villainous snake, filled him with a burning rage. He wiped a smudge of grease from his cheek with the back of his hand and gave the Dynamite Devil a final once-over. The frame was reinforced steel, the wheels were oversized and studded, and the dynamite charges were securely fastened. He straddled the seat, the engine rumbling beneath him like a caged beast. "All right, girl," he muttered to the motorcycle, "time to show that tin can what we're made of." He adjusted his goggles, pulled down his bandana to cover his mouth, and with a roar, the Dynamite Devil burst out of the workshop, leaving a trail of dust and bewildered chickens in its wake. Redemption Gulch and Serafina were counting on him. The armored train was a behemoth of steel and iron, a symbol of unchecked power and ruthless ambition. Its black paint gleamed menacingly under the desert sun, reflecting the heat back onto the parched landscape. It was longer than any train Redemption Gulch had ever seen, its cars reinforced with thick plates of steel, making it virtually impervious to small arms fire. At the front, a massive battering ram, crafted from solid iron, jutted out like a clenched fist, ready to smash through anything in its path. Gunports lined the sides of the cars, manned by Thorne's heavily armed goons, their faces grim and determined. The engine roared like a mechanical beast, spewing black smoke into the air, a dark cloud that seemed to choke the very sky. Inside, Thorne had transformed the train into his mobile command center. Maps of Redemption Gulch were spread across tables, marked with targets and demolition points. Bottles of expensive liquor were scattered about, a testament to Thorne's extravagant lifestyle. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the stench of greed. The train was more than just a machine. It was an extension of Thorne's twisted personality, a physical manifestation of his desire for control and domination. It represented the crushing weight of progress, the relentless march of industry that threatened to obliterate the simple way of life in Redemption Gulch. As it thundered across the plains, the ground trembled beneath its weight. Animals scattered, birds took flight, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the destruction to come. It was a force of nature, unstoppable and unforgiving, and it was headed straight for Redemption Gulch, carrying Serafina and the town's fate with it. The only hope lay in the ingenuity and courage of one determined cowboy and his explosive creation. Zeke leaned low over the handlebars of the Dynamite Devil, the wind screaming past his ears. The desert landscape blurred into a brown and green streak as he pushed the motorcycle to its limits. The steam engine roared, a defiant cry against the approaching doom. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The plume of black smoke from the train was growing larger, closer. Time was running out. He gripped the throttle tighter, the Dynamite Devil responding with a surge of power. The oversized wheels churned through the sand and gravel, spitting out rocks and dust in their wake. He navigated the treacherous terrain with practiced ease, dodging cacti and leaping over gullies. He knew every inch of this land, every twist and turn, every hidden shortcut. He had to intercept the train before it reached Redemption Gulch. He had to save Serafina. He had to stop Thorne. These thoughts fueled his determination, pushing him to ride faster, harder, and more recklessly than ever before. He spotted the train tracks in the distance, a silver ribbon shimmering in the heat haze. He aimed the dynamite devil towards them, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the vibrations of the approaching train through the ground, a low rumble that grew louder with each passing second. He risked another glance back. The train was almost upon him. He could see the glint of sunlight on its armored plating, the menacing shape of the battering ram. He gritted his teeth, knowing that he had only one chance. He had to time his jump perfectly. He had to trust his instincts. He had to believe in the dynamite devil. The fate of Redemption Gulch and the woman he loved depended on it. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, took a deep breath, and prepared for the most dangerous ride of his life. The dynamite devil roared alongside the train, a metal insect buzzing around a steel beast. Zeke weaved dangerously close, the heat from the engine scorching his face. He gauged the distance, his eyes narrowed in concentration. He needed to be at the front of the train, right behind where Serafina was tied. He timed it perfectly. With a burst of speed, he pulled alongside the front car, the dynamite devil vibrating violently. He gripped the handlebars tight, his knuckles white. This was it. He kicked off the ground, launching himself and the motorcycle upwards. For a heart-stopping moment, he was airborne, the dynamite devil suspended in midair like a mechanical bird. Then, with a deafening clang, the motorcycle slammed onto the roof of the train car, sparks flying as metal scraped against metal. The impact nearly threw him off, but he held on tight, his legs braced against the frame. He quickly dismounted, securing the dynamite devil to the roof with a series of chains and hooks. He then scrambled towards the front of the car, dodging the gun ports and keeping out of sight of Thorne's goons. He could see Serafina, her silhouette stark against the setting sun. She was still defiant, her eyes fixed on him, a glimmer of hope in their depths. He reached the front of the car, his heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for the next and most dangerous part of his plan. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a detonator. It was time to light the fuse. It was time to derail this metal monster and save the woman he loved. Zeke pressed the detonator. The world exploded. A deafening roar ripped through the air, followed by a shockwave that shook the train to its core. The dynamite devil lived up to its name, unleashing a series of carefully placed explosions that targeted the train's undercarriage and support structures. The front wheels of the train buckled and twisted, sending sparks flying and the ground trembling. The force of the explosion ripped apart the tracks, sending chunks of metal and wood hurtling through the air. The train lurched violently, throwing Thorne's goons off their feet. Inside the engine car, Thorne screamed in terror as the walls shook and the lights flickered. Outside, Serafina braced herself against the force of the blast, her eyes squeezed shut. She felt the ropes digging deeper into her wrists, but she refused to cry out. She trusted Zeke. She knew he would save her. The train began to derail, the cars tilting precariously as they left the tracks. Metal screeched against metal, creating a cacophony of noise that echoed across the desert. The armored plating groaned and buckled, unable to withstand the force of the explosions. One by one, the train cars began to overturn, crashing onto their sides with a thunderous boom. Dust and debris filled the air, creating a swirling vortex of chaos. The scene was one of utter destruction, a testament to the power of Zeke's invention and his unwavering determination. As the dust began to settle, Zeke emerged from the wreckage, coughing and covered in soot. He looked towards the front of the train, his heart pounding in his chest. He had derailed the train, but now came the most dangerous part, rescuing Serafina. The front of the train car, where Serafina was tied, was teetering precariously on the edge of a ravine. The explosion had weakened the structure, and it threatened to plunge into the depths below at any moment. Zeke knew he had to act fast. He grabbed his trusty lasso, the same one he used to wrangle cattle back on his ranch. He tested the rope, making sure it was strong and secure. He took a deep breath, focusing all his energy on the task at hand. With a running start, he leaped onto the teetering train car, ignoring the creaking and groaning of the metal beneath his feet. He moved quickly towards Serafina, his eyes fixed on her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the trust, the unwavering belief that he would save her. Just as he reached her, the train car gave way, plunging downwards into the ravine. Serafina screamed as she was thrown into the air, the rope snapping taut. Zeke reacted instantly. With a flick of his wrist, he expertly cast the lasso, the loop sailing through the air with pinpoint accuracy. The lasso landed perfectly around Serafina's waist, tightening securely just as she reached the bottom of her fall. Zeke braced himself, the rope pulling him forward with tremendous force. He dug his heels into the ground, using all his strength to hold on. For a moment, they were suspended in midair, Serafina dangling from the lasso, Zeke clinging to the other end, their lives hanging in the balance. Then slowly but surely, Zeke began to pull her back towards him inch by agonizing inch. It was a feat of strength and skill, a testament to his cowboy grit and determination. He wasn't about to let her fall, not now, not ever. Finally, with a last mighty heave, Zeke pulled Serafina to safety. They collapsed onto the ground, breathless and shaken, amidst the twisted wreckage of the train. Burning embers glowed around them, casting eerie shadows on their faces. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, burning metal, and gunpowder. The scene was surreal. The once mighty armored train was now a mangled mess of steel and iron, a testament to Zeke's ingenuity and courage. The desert landscape was scarred and blackened, a stark reminder of the destructive power of greed and ambition. Zeke gently untied Serafina's wrists, his fingers brushing against her skin. He could feel her trembling, but he also sensed her strength, her resilience. He looked into her eyes, and he saw a depth of gratitude and admiration that took his breath away. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Serafina nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm all right now," she whispered, "thanks to you." She reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers smearing soot across his skin. He didn't care, he was just glad she was safe. He was glad he had been able to save her. They sat in silence for a moment, taking in the scene around them, the devastation, the destruction, but also the triumph. They had faced death and destruction, and they had survived. They had stared into the abyss, and they had emerged stronger, more determined than ever before. And as the embers faded and the smoke cleared, something new began to ignite between them, a spark of something special, something powerful, something that could only be born in the heart of chaos. Zeke cupped Serafina's face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears and soot. "Look at me," he said softly. "Are you hurt? Anything broken?" Serafina shook her head, her gaze locked on his. "Just a few scrapes and bruises," she replied, "but I'm alive, and that's all that matters." He pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close. He could feel her heart beating rapidly against his chest. He closed his eyes, savoring the moment, the feeling of her warmth, her presence. He had almost lost her. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He released her slowly, his hands lingering on her shoulders. "I was so scared," he confessed, "when I saw you tied to that train." "I knew you'd come," she interrupted, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I always knew you would." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world around them seemed to fade away. The twisted metal, the burning embers, the destruction, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that they were together, safe and sound. "Thank you, Zeke," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving Redemption Gulch." He grinned, a genuine, heartfelt smile that lit up his face. "It was nothing," he said, although he knew it was anything but. He had risked his life, faced death head-on, all for her, for his town, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Come on," he said, "let's get out of here. The town's gonna want to see you." He offered her his hand, and she took it without hesitation. Together they walked away from the wreckage, towards the setting sun, towards a new beginning. A figure emerged from the wreckage, coughing and sputtering. It was Bart Thorne, his expensive suit torn and covered in soot, his greasy mustache singed. He glared at Zeke and Serafina, his face contorted with rage. "You haven't seen the last of me," he roared, shaking his fist. "I'll be back, you hear me? I'll be back and I'll make you pay for this." Before he could take another step, a group of townsfolk, armed with pitchforks and shovels, emerged from behind the overturned train cars. They had heard the explosion and had come to investigate, ready to defend their town. "Looks like the party's over, Thorne," a burly blacksmith called out, brandishing his hammer. Thorne's eyes widened in fear. He knew he was outnumbered, outgunned, and outsmarted. He tried to make a run for it, but the townsfolk quickly surrounded him, their faces grim and determined. Zeke stepped forward, a steely glint in his eyes. "It's time you paid for your crimes, Thorne," he said, his voice low and menacing. But before Zeke or the townsfolk could lay a hand on him, a small, wiry woman stepped forward. It was Mrs. Higgins, the town's baker, known for her delicious apple pies and her surprisingly strong left hook. Without a word, she wound up and delivered a swift, unexpected punch to Thorne's jaw. He crumpled to the ground like a sack of potatoes, unconscious. The townsfolk erupted in cheers, their relief and gratitude palpable. They had been living in fear for months, but now, thanks to Zeke and Serafina, their nightmare was finally over. They tied Thorne up securely and dragged him away, promising him a long stay in the town's makeshift jail. Redemption Gulch was safe, at least for now. With Thorne safely out of the picture, Zeke and Serafina found themselves alone again, the cheers of the townsfolk fading into the distance. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the wreckage. The air was cooler now, a welcome relief from the desert heat. They stood in silence for a moment, simply gazing at each other, their eyes filled with unspoken emotions. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving them both feeling exhausted but exhilarated. They had faced death, cheated fate, and emerged victorious. Zeke reached out and took Serafina's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "We did it," he said softly. "We saved Redemption Gulch." Serafina squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears. "We did," she agreed. "But I couldn't have done it without you, Zeke. You're the bravest, most resourceful man I know." He chuckled, a self-deprecating sound. "Resourceful maybe, brave, I was scared stiff the whole time." "But you didn't let fear stop you," she countered. "You faced your fears head-on and you saved us all. That's what makes you a hero, Zeke." He blushed, embarrassed by her praise. He had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a simple cowboy, a tinkerer, a dreamer. But now, looking into Serafina's eyes, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he was more than he thought he was. He leaned closer to her, his gaze intense. "Serafina," he said, his voice low and husky. "Lie." Before he could finish his sentence, she reached up and placed her fingers against his lips, silencing him. "Don't say anything," she whispered. "Just hold me." He didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She rested her head against his chest, and he closed his eyes, savoring the moment. They stood there, embraced in the fading light, two souls bound together by fate, by courage, and by a love that was just beginning to blossom. The wreckage around them faded into insignificance. In that moment, there was only them. As they walked towards Redemption Gulch, hand in hand, they could see the flickering lights of the town in the distance. The townsfolk had gathered, anxiously awaiting their return. As they drew closer, the cheers erupted, a wave of sound that washed over them, filled with relief, gratitude, and joy. They were greeted as heroes, hoisted onto shoulders and paraded through the streets. The town square, usually quiet and deserted at this hour, was now alive with music, laughter, and celebration. A makeshift bonfire blazed in the center, casting a warm glow on the faces of the townsfolk. Zeke and Serafina were seated at a place of honor, and plates piled high with food were thrust into their hands. Everyone wanted to thank them, to congratulate them, to share in their victory. As the night wore on, the celebration continued, but Zeke and Serafina found themselves drawn back to each other, seeking solace and connection in the midst of the revelry. They sat on the porch of the general store, watching the townsfolk dance and sing, their hearts filled with contentment. "I never thought I'd see Redemption Gulch like this again," Serafina said, her voice filled with emotion. "I thought we were doomed." "We're a resilient bunch," Zeke replied, grinning, "and we have you to thank for keeping our spirits up." He paused, his gaze turning serious. "Serafina," he said, "I know things have been crazy lately, but I've been meaning to tell you." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I've always cared about you, Serafina, ever since we were kids, sharing secrets under the old oak tree. And tonight, seeing you tied to that train, it made me realize just how much you mean to me." He reached out and took her hand, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I know it's not the most romantic setting," he chuckled, gesturing to the wreckage in the distance, "but I had to tell you. I think I'm falling in love with you, Serafina Stone." Serafina's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. She had secretly harbored feelings for Zeke for years, but she had always been too shy to express them. Now, hearing him confess his love for her, she felt a surge of joy and relief wash over her. "Oh, Zeke," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "I think I'm falling in love with you too." She leaned in and kissed him, a soft, tender kiss that spoke volumes. It was a kiss that sealed their fate, a promise of a future together, a testament to the power of love in the face of adversity. As they kissed, the townsfolk cheered even louder, their celebration reaching a fever pitch. They had witnessed the birth of a new love, a bond forged in the heart of chaos, a symbol of hope for the future of Redemption Gulch. Suddenly, a commotion broke out near the edge of the town square. A group of cowboys, led by Zeke's best friend Jade, were dragging something towards the bonfire. It was the Dynamite devil, miraculously still intact, albeit slightly battered and bruised. "We figured you'd want your trusty steed back, Zeke," Jade called out, grinning. "She may be a little worse for wear, but she still runs like a dream." Zeke chuckled, shaking his head. "Thanks, Jade," he said. "But I think I'll stick to horses for a while." He looked at Serafina, his eyes filled with love. "Besides," he added, "I have everything I need right here." The townsfolk cheered again, their hearts swelling with happiness. They had their town back, they had their freedom, and they had Zeke and Serafina, two heroes who had found love in the midst of chaos. The future of Redemption Gulch was bright, filled with hope, and with the promise of a love that would last a lifetime. As the first rays of dawn peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Zeke and Serafina saddled up two horses. They packed a small bag with essentials, a few blankets, some food, and a map. They were leaving Redemption Gulch, at least for a little while. They rode through the town square, waving goodbye to the few townsfolk who were already awake. Mrs. Higgins, still sporting a bandage on her hand from her heroic punch, handed Serafina a freshly baked apple pie. "For the road, darlings," she said, winking, "and for your honeymoon." Zeke and Serafina blushed, but they accepted the pie gratefully. They knew that the townsfolk were happy for them, that they supported their decision to start a new life together. They rode out of town, towards the open plains, leaving the wreckage of the armored train behind them. It was a symbol of the past, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome. But now they were riding towards the future, a future filled with love, adventure, and endless possibilities. As they reached the crest of a hill, they paused, taking in the breathtaking view. The sun was rising higher in the sky, bathing the landscape in a warm, golden light. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of sagebrush and wildflowers. Zeke turned to Serafina, his eyes filled with love. "Where to?" he asked, grinning. Serafina smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. "Anywhere," she replied, "as long as I'm with you." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Together they spurred their horses forward, riding off into the sunrise towards a new beginning, a love story that was just beginning to unfold. The end.